Every year at Easter, we find another way to tell this story. Just feels like if we're going to be religiously literate, we all need to know this story. It's central to our culture, if nothing else. It also may offer real insight into what it means to be alive. This time we're telling it in 3 parts, and you'll see in your order of service, the first part is called The Coffin. And this is partially because we don't tell the story through the week. A lot of people start on Palm Sunday, and we tell the story all week long, but here, since we don't celebrate it that way, we tell the story all at once. And so we're going to start with the coffin. Jill, in her genius, has created a coffin for us. Do you all see it? Looks a little like a vampire coffin, which I appreciate. So before the Easter story, before this story of resurrection, comes a whole life that Jesus led. He lives in a land that is occupied. The Romans are occupying it. Jesus has been very annoying to the establishment. He is challenging everything. He challenges economic systems. He challenges gender roles. He challenges political systems, social systems, all the religious authority. He challenges everything. He moves through the world asking big questions about what it means to be alive, what does it mean to be human, and why isn't everything a little bit better? He challenges people to reconsider the world as they understood it. And he enters Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. Jesus is Jewish, and Passover is a high holy day for him. And Jerusalem is the capital city. It's a lot like going with your friends to New York for Christmas, right? It's like everyone shows up together. They're celebrating. But he also knows he could be in trouble because he's made a lot of people mad. People have been listening to him. People are gathering around him. He has a following. He has disciples. He has people who want to know what he has to say, and people who wish he would stop saying it. And he knows that when he goes to the capital city, when he goes to New York, where the establishment is, he could be in trouble. But he goes anyway, and he enters Jerusalem hoping for a party, but aware that it might be something else. On Thursday night, he and his friends celebrate Passover. And at that meal, he says, I know that one of you has told the authorities where I am. I know that this isn't going to end the way that I want it to. I understand. And then he washed the feet of his friends. He lived in a desert. Imagine for yourself, you're wearing open sandals or bare feet, and you've been walking through the dirt and the sand, and he washes people's feet. It's a way of saying, I love you, and I want to take care of you. And they accepted the kindness. And after the meal, they went outside, and his friends fell asleep, and he prayed. And later that night, he was arrested, and there was a trial, and he was found guilty of blasphemy, of saying things he wasn't supposed to say. And he was brought to the Roman authorities, and he was tortured and killed, nailed to a cross. And I'm not going to go into the details of that, but it was a terrible death. It was a painful and long death. And right before dying, he prayed the 22nd Psalm and said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And his mother and his brother and his closest friends were at the foot of the cross, and they were crying, and they were with him when he died. And they took his body, and they wrapped it, and they placed it in a tomb cut into a rock, and they moved a stone in front of it to protect it while they went off to the Sabbath. It was the Sabbath. That's how we know what day it was. And they were going to pray and wait and grieve until they could return on Sunday. So until this point, the story is kind of normal, right? It's just a story of a guy. But then things start to get different. Sunday morning, Sabbath is over, and the women go to the tomb. Now, they have been grieving. They are afraid. They don't know what's happened, right? Their closest friend, their mother, brother, they are worried. What might it mean for them? But they're also in the those first few days of grief. And they go to the tomb, and they're going to anoint the body. But when they get to the tomb, the stone has been moved. Now, there were soldiers outside who said, nobody came. We don't know what happened, but it's been moved. And there was an angel. And the angel said to the women, Jesus has risen. The body is no longer here. He is no longer here. And the women didn't really know what that meant. They were confused. And then Jesus appeared to them. Now, I'm giving you a story here. I'm not giving you theology. I'm just telling you what the story says. There are a lot of ways for us to talk about this story, and I also want to point out that the story is told in different ways by different people. So I'm giving you one version, or I'm kind of mashing up a few of these versions. I'm focusing a lot on the women because, frankly, they were key to the story. And if you really look at the story, what you see is like the women had a message and then the men were like, no, that's crazy, and didn't listen to them. That's a lot of this story. Nonetheless, here's the story. So the women didn't know what was happening, and then they saw Jesus. They saw him. Mary Magdalene, who I really believe was in love with Jesus, I suspect he was in love with her too, she saw him. She saw him and she knew him and she hugged him. And she said, what has happened? And he said, I have risen and I want you to go and tell everyone. Go. There's a message. Love survives. Go. And she did. She went out and she went to tell people. And really they were like, listen, woman, that sounds like nonsense. But she did. She went and she told, and the women told. And then there were two people walking. They were on the road to Emmaus, and they were walking and talking about all the things that happened, and a stranger joined them, and they were telling the stranger what had happened, and as they're walking, they were hungry and took out some bread, and the stranger broke the bread and shared it, and they knew, oh, this is different. This man is different. Something else is happening here. And they realized that love was alive. And they turned around and they went back because they had a new message. Love had not died. And then all of the men, all of the disciples, the apostles, they were in what we call the upper room. I have now learned, having been in Jordan, that that is actually how people live. The manger is downstairs, and then the upper room is where the people live. So they were in the upper room, and they were frightened, and they didn't know what happened. And then someone came to them, and it was Jesus, and they too knew that love had not died. They knew that even with brutality, even with death, that life returns, that life comes back, that there is a cycle of love, and that love cannot die, even when it looks so bleak, even when the grief is so strong. Love still doesn't die. That love can walk in your door and say, I am still here. And the disciples knew it to be true. They knew that even in their fear, that the hope they used to have was still real, that they could remember, that they could embody that same hope, that same life, that love could still be what holds them all together. Something had happened, and they were all changed. So we talked about the coffin. We talked about about what happens next, and now we're talking about the message. Resurrection is a complicated idea. And it doesn't mean that someone has come back to life, right? I mean, we like to joke about zombie Jesus, but this is not zombie Jesus. This is a different way of understanding the world. And it isn't really so much necessarily about Jesus. It's about all of the people who are left behind. It's about life that returns to us over and over again. I had a congregant who lost her son and was grieving horribly, and then at some point said to me that she reached out and was pinching a flower to help it grow better, and realized in that moment that she had hope in life again. And did it so instinctively that for so long she couldn't even do that, and watched her hand. There's a way in which, even in grief, we move and remember and realign ourselves with love. We become, even in the saddest moments, resurrected. Life returns. We still find love and play. There's a message that Jesus brought us. There's a message that even if you're not Christian, most of us want to hold on to. So I want us to think together. I'm going to ask you to maybe call some things out. Are there messages? Is there something in the message of Jesus that you find inspiring? A moment, a story, something that you've heard or lived? One of the ones that I love is the loaves and fishes, that all the people gathered and there wasn't enough food, and then there was. It was sort of this miracle, right? But the miracle to me is that everyone shared. Everyone found what they had, and everyone could eat. For me, that's a story I mean, I'm Jewish and Italian. So that's a story that I love. It's a way of saying there is always abundance. Are there stories that live in you?
Even though he said that one of his friends had told them where he was, he didn't try and figure out who it was.
Oh yeah, he was loyal to his friend even in the end. Anyone else have it? Is there something about the Christian story that you like, that you want to tell us? No? You don't have to. Anyone else have a story, something, a parable, one that lives in you?
When my fish died, I buried it in my plant, and it helped it to grow better.
Ooh, that is an excellent Easter story. Thank you. She said that when her fish died, she buried it in a plant and helped it to grow. That's the Easter story. I also love the prodigal son story, right? Someone leaves, maybe because I tend to be the one who takes off and does something inappropriate, and then you come back. You return. You come back and are loved, right? All of the stories. Does anyone else have a story? Letting other people support you. The way that Jesus touched the lepers, healed the sick, walked on water. The welcoming. Oh, go ahead.
For me, it's every time when Jesus walked with the other two out of Emmaus.
When he walked
Walked with the other two.
with the other two.
Because I think sometimes we don't have to answer all the questions we walk with together. When we walk, things are changing. And then when we come together, we realize what we have.
That's beautiful. It's the way we accompany each other. We don't have all the answers. We befriend. We are there with each other. And that's how the world changes. I love the way that Jesus welcomed women, even when other people thought they didn't belong. When he inspired generosity or shifted compassion. I love the story of the sheep, right? There are 100 sheep and one goes off, and he goes and finds the one. Those are the messages, those are the stories. The idea that some people don't belong or that people should stay in their place, those are the ones we get rid of. We embrace as Jesus embraced. We challenge social conventions. Go ahead. Yes, the way he held up women, for sure. Love thy neighbor. The meek shall inherit the earth. Turning over the tables for the moneylenders. Telling the rich man, you can absolutely make it into heaven, just give away your money. Are there others? So we carry this message. We become the embodiment. We become the resurrection. This isn't a story from 2,000 years ago. This is a story that lives in us now. The story of generosity, of compassion, of inclusion. This is a story of hope that we still live. So what we're going to do together, we have a tree that is growing out of our coffin. Our tree isn't finished yet. We are all going to bring this tree to life. We're going to hang symbols. Our friends have started. We're going to hang symbols. So we're going to ask you to come forward. We're going to sing a little. We're going to dance a little. And you're all going to come forward, and I'll help you. And they're going to help you, especially for the high branches. We're going to hang our messages of love and hope. We're going to bring this tree back to life. We are going to be the resurrection.